Thank you for tuning in to another episode of WGC Fits. Today we're going to do a comparison video that we got from the comment section. So thank you for all of the comments. We always appreciate. Today we're going to be comparing the Callaway Elyte iron to the Ping G440 iron. Both really good, both kind of leading the class of that kind of quote unquote, flagship model game improvement type iron. Jump into it, right? We'll get into kind of the different types of models, the different prices, and kind of potentially how they differ. They're very similar, I will tell you that. Let's start off, just go ahead and hit a couple, Ian.
All right, we got the Ping.
Ping first. So with the Ping, I'll talk about some specs as you kind of hit a few. We're looking at $157 a club. Pretty decent price, right in that middle 150 range. That seems to be the sweet spot for these game improvement style irons. 29 degrees of loft on this guy.
Yeah.
Tons of fitting options. Mainly, or I should say mainly the stock kind of shaft, if you will, is a shaft that's actually made specifically to help with the weighting of the club. It's called the AWT 3.0. Nice thing about Ping, and I've always said this, is when they're building clubs not around a different company's kind of like spec from a shaft perspective. They actually are having companies build shafts specifically to what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So it just helps a little bit with the overall feel of the club, right? Like often, I always laugh when people say this in fittings. Often people tell me that the Ping just feels a little bit different. Whether it's good or bad, again, that's dependent up to the player. However, it always just feels a little bit different, and that's kind of testament to kind of what they're doing. So
it's got some horsepower though.
It definitely, this has some pop, right? So both of these clubs are going to be helping with a couple of different windows.
145.
Yeah, smash factor is ridiculous, dude. With the Ping specifically, the past few years, they've been working on, how to basically create a face that gives them a little bit of a competitive, maybe even advantage in the ball speed world, which is never a bad thing.
146, new record.
As we're saying here, smash factor, right? To get an iron to have a smash factor in the 1.4 plus window is pretty ridiculous, because that means that face is generating quite a bit of ball speed. Has to do with the the face flexing, which is a good thing. In terms of models, right? So there's two kind of setups for the Ping iron, I guess the best way to put it, because you have the stock setup here, and this is where they do stuff a little bit differently, right? You can actually get a retro spec or a power spec version of this iron. What that would do is effectively you have a club that is cast and made to have a weaker loft or a stronger loft. Now, why is that important? That's important because it doesn't actually affect the bounce of the club. Specifically, when you have clubs that are cast and the lofts are adjusted, you maintain the same bounce. Now that's important because when these clubs are being manufactured and designed by these engineers, they're designed to function and work best at that spec, right? Now obviously as a fitter, I can adjust things all day, but anytime I'm making slight minor adjustments, we're taking that club and altering kind of some of the stuff that went into it originally. Now, some people would say, who cares? Some people would say that's not a good thing. More or less, it's a thing, right? So, it's something that one company at least thought was important enough to have out there. So, there we go.
I will say after 5 shots, 4 of them went dead straight.
Yes.
It sounds funky.
Yeah.
That's not the right word to say. It sounds like a game improvement iron, but it doesn't feel like a game improvement.
Correct. Both of these clubs, I'm going to tell you, are probably going to feel a little bit better in that regard. The sound is going to be a tough one to get away from because it's a big hollow golf club, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sound's bouncing around on the walls and they're pretty good. However, from a feel perspective, I tend to agree, right? I make it a point to try to hit a lot of these clubs just to get an idea from a feel perspective, and this doesn't feel horrible, it really doesn't.
I need to play these because I just hit 5 in a row dead straight.
I mean, we can get you fit up for a set. It's not tough,
I need an extra retro loft.
Extra retro? Well, that's the thing you gotta also realize, right, is that's part of the fitting tools, fitting kit, right?
Yeah.
Adjusting loft, it's important. So we'll talk a little bit about maybe some of the differences between the two clubs performance-wise after. Let's hit a couple with the Elyte.
Now, the Elyte also has a quote-unquote retro model called the High Launch.
Correct. Yes, and that's kind of a big thing because normally there's not too many competitors in that window
that do
that do that. Game improvement irons typically aren't generally. The companies generally don't worry about what loft is on that club.
No.
Even if fitters, we tell them all the time you need loft on the club. So with the Callaway Elyte, we're looking at a 29-degree 7-iron again. Base model, we are looking at $149.99. So right, like I said, that $150 price point, that's kind of like the sweet spot for these clubs right now.
Yeah.
Standard shaft in this guy, or stock, I guess the best way to put it. Vector, which kind of replaces the Elevate shafts. Lightweight steel option to kind of help produce some launch, I guess the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Now, why is it important to use that is the quote-unquote stock shaft. This club's a bit of a rocket launcher. This club doesn't go very high. This club goes very forward very quickly.
Yeah.
And that is why it is so good that they have these other models. Now, specifically with the other models of this one, you've got the Elyte, which is kind of like the flagship. Then you have the HL model, you have the X model, and you have the Max Fast model. Yeah. The HL model is a little bit weaker in loft. So if you need, HL high launch, basically, right? You need high launch, you throw that in there. The X model is a little bit of a chunkier sole, right? A little bit draw biased, actually, too, if you want to really get into the weeds of it, right? It definitely can turn over a bit on you. And then the Max Fast model is quite a bit lighter, right?
Yeah.
Now, weight is another thing that's going to really kind of differ, I guess. We'll start getting into the differing things between these clubs. In general, right, kind of the old, I guess, fitting adage would be, Ping typically uses quite heavy golf equipment and golf heads. Callaway typically uses heads that are a little bit lighter. We're not talking about anything that's too crazy different here. However, I will tell you the overall weight of that club is probably just going to feel a touch lighter than the Ping would.
That's why I'm pulling them. It feels
it feels light, right? Yeah. And that's the thing, right? The design, really, that kind of comes from, ethos and design kind of process, right? Callaway wants to make something that's a little bit lighter. Ping wants to make something that's a little bit heavier. Always been that way. So that's kind of the major first differing thing I would say is weight is going to feel different between the two clubs.
Yeah.
Next would be that launch characteristic. The Callaway is definitely going to launch a bit lower. It's trying to produce a pretty significant amount of ball speed, right? That's why the other models are there. In their eyes, if you want to hit the ball higher, get the HL or get the X and kind of, crank that loft up kind of thing. Now, to say that one's better, I can't really say that. They're achieving what they're definitely designing by the specs. What's up?
I will say that this one feels a lot easier to swing faster.
Well, that's the lightness of it, probably.
Yeah. I'm up like 3 miles per hour to my feel of what it should be.
Yep, and that's kind of one of the things that I always use in a fitting is, you got to understand or you got to recognize, let's say, does a player do better with a lighter feeling club or a heavier feeling club? There's no, regardless what anyone says, there is no, set, right? People always do better with X or, something like that. That's not true. Swing characteristics change depending on weight of the club. And as a fitter, my job is to make you swing the best I can make you swing without really talking about swing. What's up?
What do you think about the sound between the two?
They're very similar sound. I gotta say I don't love either. I will say I actually think that one sounds maybe a hair better.
Yeah, I thought this one sounded a little better.
Does it feel as soft though?
Same.
I thought that one felt
a little firmer, you think?
A touch firmer, but it sounded a bit better. And that's just strictly on.
I can agree with that.
Closing your eyes and making little 50-yard swings, right?
Yeah, I can agree with that.
From a fitting perspective, I prefer that one over the other one. If I had to, play them, I'd kind of want to test them outside, I suppose, but I'd probably lean towards this one on feel.
Yeah. I can agree with
And honestly, that could be more just, I'm more familiar with that feel because I've played Ping stuff for a long time. So, Here are both of the 5 shots that Mr. Ian has hit.
I will say I do better with a heavy golf club.
Yes.
We know
That's what I was going to say. I remember now. We were talking about weight. You know, some players are going to react better and deliver the club better dynamically with more weight versus less. Me, for example, if you give me a club that's too light, I can't feel it at all, and I have a really hard time swinging it.
WG fits, that's how it works out.
When talking about weight, players are always going to react differently and respond differently to weight. Dynamically with their delivery, it's going to change. If something's too heavy, you're going to tend to get late on stuff. If something's too light, you're going to tend to get early on stuff. Personally, I can't really play with clubs that are a little bit on the light side. It doesn't work, right? Yep. I know that you also tend to do well with stuff that's a little bit on the heavier side,
feels
right?
Heavy.
Yeah, feels heavy, swing weight, right?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a difference. So that's definitely a tool in the fitter's belt to kind of play with. Now let's look at what each of these clubs did, right? We'll start off with the ping. Ping is the white group here. We're looking at 80 peak height, 42 landing angle, 181 carry with a 2.8 standard deviation, 5,500 spin with 220 standard deviation, and a 145 smash. All in all, that's very, very good.
Very good.
Right? Not upset about that at all, right? Even getting over here, this would be something where obviously with a game improvement iron, we're gonna see a little bit less from a landing angle perspective.
With how?
However, I'm still gonna try to fit you for something that we can get at least over 40, 41, you know?
But, you know, I hit down on it, so I'm not getting the loss that most
that
people
was
get out of it.
very much, I would say, within an acceptable realm. Now we look at the Callaway. Club speed goes up a hair, smash factor goes down a touch, ball speed goes up a hair, spin drops a touch, carry goes up a touch, peak height flattens out, landing angle flattens out. That's kind of the realest and truest representation of what I would describe these two clubs doing.
Yeah.
The Callaway is going to go just a hair longer. The Ping's going to go a hair higher. Both are going to try to
get the spin rate.
Get their spins where they are designed to be, right? I would describe the Callaway iron as being slightly less spinning than the Ping iron. And again, I would describe it as launching a touch flatter. So that is a great representation of what these clubs are and do. So thank you for leaving us the comment. Any last questions or comments from Captain Ballspeed over here?
It's cold. It's cold.
It's a little cold. It is a little cold. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Again, we love doing these types of videos. We're going to start trying to do more of them. So give us more comparison things that you would like, and we'll get the videos produced and make them work for you. So thanks for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.